Students, so today we are dealing with the concept sexual reproduction. So far we have finished asexual reproduction related to plants as well as animals and asexual reproduction types. Okay, so today we are dealing with some concepts all related to sexual reproduction. So before going to what is actually the sexual reproduction, we'll study some phases, okay, in a life cycle or in a lifespan of an organisms. So as we have discussed, okay, lifespan, what is lifespan? The time period between birth and natural death. And I have told you between birth and natural death there are different phases, okay, like I have told you in the beginning, like a growth phase, a reproductive phase, senescence phase. We take up those phases in detail. Okay, so life phases. So there are three different life phases. Vegetative phase or juvenile phase, reproductive phase, and senescent phase. So these three are different phases, okay, shown by sexually reproducing organisms. So this comprises from birth till the natural death. Okay, so the first one, vegetative or juvenile phase. So this vegetative or juvenile phase indicate growth of an individual. Okay, what happens during this phase? There is growth. The animals or plants will grow and they undergo some sort of development. Okay, vegetative is related to plants. When we say a plant first life phase, then we should tell vegetative. Vegetative represents plants, okay, first life phase, and whereas juvenile it indicates in animals. Okay, so this is what happens. This phase comes in between birth and before the maturation process. Okay, that is growth phase. Okay, so next is reproductive. As the name indicates, it relates to the reproduction, okay, concept. So what happens during this reproductive phase? So once the plant or animals will undergo growth or development, they are now ready for the maturation process, or they will get the capability or ability to reproduce, to produce the young ones. So that phase we call it as reproductive phase. Then how we can indicate this reproductive phase in animals or in plants? So what happens when we see a plant? If I'm talking about the well-developed plants, because we are talking under sexual reproduction, and sexual reproduction, properly sexually reproducing plants are our angiosperms in the plant kingdom. Okay, like what we say, those are flowering plants. I'll take up the example from angiosperms itself. When we see a flowering plant, or just take an example of hibiscus. Hibiscus is one of the angiosperms. So what happens when we see a hibiscus plant? If there is no flowers, okay, on that plant, hibiscus plant, there is no hibiscus flower, then it indicates that hibiscus plant is in the vegetative phase, that is growth phase, and they are preparing for the reproduction process or for the next phase. Just imagine the same plant, when we see a flowers on that, so it indicates that hibiscus plant is in the reproductive phase. So as a conclusion, what we can tell, reproductive phase in flowering plants is indicated by presence of flower. If a plant possesses flower, then it indicates they are in the reproductive phase. They have produced their reproductive parts in the flower and they are ready for sexual reproduction. In the same way, in animals, especially in human beings, I'll take example. When we say we are in reproductive phase, okay, we can say we are in reproductive phase at the time of puberty, means when we attain maturation, especially the female individuals, okay, where we can locate the puberty in us. How we can locate the maturation phase in us? By the means of menarche, that is starting of menstrual cycle at the age of 12 to 14 years. What happens in our body? We start menstruating, means we say we are matured now. Okay, this is what the reproductive phase in animals as well as in flowers. Okay, so third one is senescent phase, or it is also called as aging or old age. If we take example of human beings, old age is the stage of senescent phase, or we start aging. Okay, one example, same thing as we have taken puberty, a stage of reproductive phase, an example. In the same way, senescent phase, what we can give the example? Menopause at the age of 45 to 50 years. What happens? Okay, we stop menstruating, right? The menstrual cycle will stop. Okay, that is one of the physiological aspects in our body that indicates we are in the senescent phase. Aging is happening. What actually the senescent phase is called? What happens means, in this phase, all the metabolic activities, because in our body there is a sum total of metabolic reaction or biochemical reaction, we call it as metabolism. It may be constructive or destructive, that is catabolism or anabolism. Okay, if metabolism is finely or normally it is happening in our body, it indicates a healthy life. Okay, but in senescent phase, what happens? This metabolic activity comes slower and stops. Okay, that indicates death. Understood? So this is how we can elaborate the different phases in a lifespan of an organism, that too specially sexually reproducing organism. Vegetative or juvenile, reproductive phase where we are capable for reproduction, we are reproductively active, we start to develop the sexual reproducing organs, everything, sexual, secondary sexual characters, everything, that is reproductive phase. Okay, and senescent phase is the last and third phase where we can see aging of an organism. It may be plants or animals. Okay, we discussed about plants, that is cessation or stoppage of all the metabolic activities. How in plants it is indicated? In plants it is indicated by yellowing of leaves. What happens? So there will be yellowing of leaves. The green nice leaves turned into yellow colored leaves, which indicates aging or senescence phase in plants. So this is what the life phases of an sexually reproducing organisms. Okay, yeah, I hope you understood. So we'll take up the next concepts in sexual reproduction. Okay, so the next concept is related to animals. I'll take next, plants I'll explain. Okay, as we studied the reproductive phase, and in all organisms this reproductive phase, the duration varies. Okay, there is variability in the duration of reproductive phase. Okay, based on this duration in the or variability in the reproductive phase, the animals are classified into continuous breeders and seasonal breeders. So what happens? The reproductive phase means in continuous breeders, the organisms in continuous breeders, they are active throughout the year. Okay? Active. They are reproductively active throughout the year and they breed throughout the year. So hence they are called as continuous. There will be a continuity in the breeding process. They are not inactive. So they are active throughout the year and they breed continuously. Hence they are called as continuous breeders, and examples are human beings, mice, dog, etc. And seasonal breeders, by the name it indicates, okay, they are active during only favorable season. They are active during favorable, or they are active only in favorable season. Like example we can take in a frog. Rainy season. Okay, the favorable season to reproduce, to perform breeding, okay, for frog is rainy season. So this is what, based on the activity or the variability on the reproductive phase, the animals are classified into continuous breeders and seasonal breeders. What is continuous breeders? They are active throughout the year. They can breed throughout their lifetime, means throughout their year. So hence they are continuous breeders. Whereas seasonal, they are meant for, they are active during only the favorable season, which is favorable for them. They are get activated and they start breeding. Okay, example, rainy season. During rainy season, frogs become active and they start breeding and start laying eggs. Okay, so next thing is based on reproductive cycles. Okay, based on reproductive cycles, especially I'm talking about placental mammals. They show two kinds of reproductive cycles. One is oestrus cycle, another is menstrual cycle. So first one is the variability, the duration of reproductive phase, continuous and seasonal. And next is based on reproductive cycles. So reproductive cycles are the cyclic changes taking place in ovary, maybe based on the hormones, the egg development, or in the reproductive tract, the cyclic changes. This we call it as reproductive cycles. And especially with respect to the placental mammals, the mammals which bears placenta during their fetal development. As we say, placenta is a physical connection between mother and fetus, right? It's a connection, physical as well as physiological connection. In the same way, the mammals which bears this physical as well as physiological connection are called as placental mammals. With respect to the placental mammals, they show a different kinds of reproductive cycles. Those are, one is oestrus cycle, another is menstrual cycle. Okay, this oestrus cycle, we can find this oestrus cycle in female non-primates, whereas this menstrual cycle in female primates. Okay, and the next difference is there is no bleeding during this cycle. They won't bleed during this cycle, but here there will be bleeding during the cycle, that is 4 to 5 days per cycle. What we do, we bleed. Okay, next, what makes them not to bleed? Because there is no shedding of endometrium wall. So endometrium is one of the layer which is present in the uterus. This is one of the uterine layer. I'll tell you about the menstrual cycle in depth. We are going to study in third chapter, that is human reproduction. Okay, whereas here shedding of endometrium wall, hence there is bleeding. Okay, so next is, we'll write up the examples. Examples are cow, sheep, dog. All these are non-primates, whereas primates are us, humans, apes, and monkeys. So this is what the changes in the reproductive cycles. Okay, now we'll talk about plants. So in plants, so based on their life cycles, or lifespan, the plants are classified into 3 types. Annuals, biennials, okay, biennials and perennials. Okay, so their growth is only for a year, and year 2, and here many. Okay, because their life cycle is only annual. Annual we say a year, right? Annual is represented as a year. Biennial means twice. Okay, like 2 supplementary years. So what happens within these 2, annuals and biennials, that there is a clear cut of all these life phases. What we have studied, vegetative phase, reproductive phase, and senescent phase is very clear. We can observe very clearly all these 3 phases in annuals and biennials. Annuals, within a year, once at the end of the season, they start flowering. Okay, and here in biennials, at the end of the second year, like in the second year, they start flowering. And in perennials, so there are many supplementary years. They can live together. Their growth will be for many years. Okay, so hence there may be flowering, like they may be polycarpic or they may be monocarpic also. May single they flower at once, that is monocarpic, or many times called as polycarpic. So this is what the types of plants, okay, based on their life cycle or life span. And other than this, there are 2 facts like unusual flowering. Okay, I'll give you the 2 examples which shows unusual flowering. So it is very important as a board point of view or any competitive exams. So there are unusual flowering. So those 2 unusual flowerings. So one is in the bamboo plant. Another is Strobilanthus kuntiana. Okay, or it is also called as Neelakuranji. Okay, so what is about the unusual flowering here? So what happens in bamboo tree? Every 50 to 100 years once they flower. Okay, the flowering takes place every 50 to 100 years once. Okay, within 100 to 50 to 100 year, once they flower, means they show the flowering and they die. This is the unusual flowering once in every 50 to 100 years. In the same way, for Strobilanthes kuntiana, every once in 12 years. Every once in 12 years they show the flowering. And why they are commonly called as a Neela Kuranji? Neela, it represents blue. Okay, it shows a beautiful blue colored inflorescence at the regions, the hilly regions, okay, hills of some parts of Karnataka, Kerala and Tamil Nadu. Okay, so they are present, the Strobilanthes kuntiana, they are present in the hilly regions of some places of Karnataka, Kerala and Tamil Nadu. What happens? Because of their beautiful colored inflorescence, it will attract the tourists during their flowering season. Okay, whole field look like a blue colored sky or blue colored field. So it is a very clear or very beautiful vision to observe. So hence this season, the flowering seasons of Neela Kuranji will attract the tourists during that flowering season, because at every 12 years once they flower. So these are the two examples for unusual flowering. Okay, so this is about the basics things related to sexual reproduction. Okay, in next class we'll start with the events or stages of sexual reproduction. Thank you.